Welcome to the GTM Loop. I'm Angie Milano.
And I'm Holly Glowaty. And as always, we are talking about how to build go-to-market strategies that actually work. So real stories, real tactics, and conversations that help you sell it, keep it, or grow it.
All right. And today we are excited to welcome our second guest to the podcast. We will be talking to Arden Evenson, who focuses on writing content and messaging that resonates for banks, FIs, and end users. All right. Welcome to the podcast, Arden Evenson. It's great to have you.
I am so excited to be here with y'all.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. We had such a great conversation the other day when we caught up that I think some of the things we talked about really resonate well with what we're building, with what our audience thinks about. So just to kick us off, I feel like for anyone who hasn't met you before, if we had to think about you as a person and the work you're doing, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I often say that I'm like overflowing with it doesn't have to be this way energy. And I think that like comes out in a few different ways that like I've been running my own business since 2014 and I really believe that we can like work in a way that like actually fits with our lives, that doesn't take over everything, that doesn't drain us completely and like leaves us with time and energy to do other things that we care about. And the joke tagline for my company is more time to do less, which has nothing to do with the work that we do. But I'm just very direct about like, I do really good work. I work hard when I'm working and I do not work that much. And I think similarly, like, I don't think that we have to like present ourselves as like one-dimensional humans to like be successful, that, you know, we should be able to talk about our interests, our families, our hobbies, our health, whatever, like without kind of compromising like quote unquote professionalism. Like if you like follow me on LinkedIn, like I am like probably talking about fertility treatments or parenting like 50% of the time.
Yes.
And like talking about the highs and lows of building my business that don't have that much to do with client work. And then yes, occasionally also talking about like fintech and my work. And so I think that like the status quo challenging thing inside of me like also comes up in my fintech work.
Yes.
That like, you know, I would say, you know, one niche in, I'm like working with like scaling fintechs to help them shape content and messaging that resonates with banks, financial institutions, end users, whoever. And then like even more narrow than that, like I'm specifically focused on like working with founding teams within kind of financial inclusion. And, you know, whether that's like thinking differently about how we like earn money, build wealth, foster financial independence.
And one of the things that jumped out at me when we talked last time was we started talking about the idea of copywriting and all of the stuff that we're constantly bombarded with on LinkedIn and M-Gate, all of those different
Oh my
things
God, so many feelings.
Right? So many feelings, right?
Yeah. I thought I'd been using the M- for years. It turns out I've been using the N-.
Oh, yes, same.
And honestly, I like it, so I'm gonna keep using it. It's a little shorter. And I like to put spaces around them. That's how you know it's me.
I love that. Well, that's exactly the best segue here. So
you're like low-key signature on things.
If you see a client, if you see a fintech doing that, I probably wrote it.
I love that. Well, that's exactly right. So that's the best segue into my kind of thought around what you're building and the kind of content that you're writing. One of the things that we all know happens is the idea of like, okay, well, everybody's using AI to help them be more productive, create some content. But what is the one thing that's like super misunderstood by founders that you work with about using AI to help you automate and refine some of that without saying like cut, paste?
Right. God. I mean, yeah, talking specifically about like LLMs when we're talking about, you know, AI, like the chat GPTs and the Claudes or whatever of the world. Like, I think that like, if you're not sort of providing any training or like guardrails or anything around it, I think it gets like two things wrong. And like, these aren't surprising things because these are things people get wrong and people train these machines. And so one for me is like, And this is very much a personal value, which is like, do not be clever at the expense of clarity. That
Yes.
like bring your unique voice or perspective, you know, but for me, like being cutesy or punny or like making a trendy reference like isn't worth losing a buyer. There's plenty of other ways for you to show off your brand personality. I mean, if you go
Yeah.
to my website, the cursor's literally a firefly. Like, but like I'm very clear about the work that I do, right? Like
Yeah.
there's still ways of like conveying who you are as a brand and like what that tone and voice is, but like be really clear that like I was very early at SoFi, and I remember getting into an argument about what copy we were going to put on the San Francisco Muni buses for an ad. And this was when SoFi was only doing student loan refinancing. So it's
Okay.
like 2012, 2013 was
Yeah.
not the neobank with the
Right.
stadiums that we know now.
Right.
And at that point, refinance your student loans didn't really exist. Like this was sort of a new category. Every
Yeah.
bank that had talked about refinancing student loans beforehand was actually talking about loan consolidation. But this was
Mhm.
like refinancing your mortgage, you're getting a new interest rate. And so, plenty of ideas got thrown around about what we could put on this bus copy. And I was like, no, no, we're just putting we refinance student loans on the side of this bus. I was like, that's
Right.
it because people don't even know you can refinance student loans. And we can't get people excited about what the brand is going to be and what you can do and what you can say when your name's on a stadium and people are familiar with you at the beginning. We just need to be as clear as possible and help people understand what we're doing, what we're trying to sell to them so that they can connect with it.
Yeah.
So you weren't a game-changing fintech solution that is
For modern
disrupting the
finance,
market through incredible integrations and only like a two-sprint API?
No.
no, that was not an AI powered tool for modern finance.
Well, I think the other part that's like really interesting is the idea of SoFi, what it is today, versus like I've sold student loan products. It's
Hmm.
so hard to get people to even know, like, hey, you have rights. You can make changes to these things.
Yeah.
I feel like
Right.
everything you say in that world matters because if you say one thing that's misleading, you're messing with people's livelihood.
Right. And it's such a huge amount of debt, right? And like there's so much
Yeah.
wrong structurally still with how
Right.
student loans work that like
Yes.
and it's this and it's a wild financial product that we just like give to people and
Oh my
they
God,
don't
yeah.
know, we don't give them any education about it. We don't tell them anything about it. They don't have to sort of like know anything about the sort of debt that they're taking on. And so, it's funny like talking about financial inclusion. Like I joined SoFi because like I think people forget SoFi stands for social finance.
Hmm.
It
Right.
was a financial inclusion company. I don't
Yes.
think it would argue that that's what it's doing now. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I don't have a problem with like a better digital experience in a neobank. A lot of the people that I know that are SoFi customers are very happy. But it's not a financial inclusion product anymore. It's not a financial inclusion company. And like,
Right.
a lot of times I think especially then, I feel like there's this idea of democratizing finance. And I always said, like, you don't get credit for democratizing finance if you're only doing it for slightly less wealthy white men. And like that's not what democratizing is. And so that sort of connects me to my other thing of like, what do these AI things get wrong? And it's that like not all fintech buyers look the same. So if you're using these tools to help you with messaging or content, you have to teach it about your audience because its assumptions are going to be wrong. It's assumptions on like what an average job or a salary might look like, to even like why people are facing financial hardship because like spoiler alert, it's probably not because they aren't working hard enough. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you have to like push like you're not only do you need to tell it sort of who your audience is, you're probably going to have to remind it that
Mhm.
this is sort of this that we're not talking about these people. We're not taught like this. We're not talking about this sort of very specific archetype of a customer. We're starting to explore other types of customers, underserved customers, which are not going to be the sort of average buyer that AI tools are going to spit out.
Yeah, because a lot of that audience is also not interacting with AI. So it hasn't, when you talk about the LLMs, it's not like it's not had the opportunity to
Yeah.
get that firsthand knowledge even, which I think is a very interesting nuance I had not thought of until you
Until
were
you
just
brought it
saying
up.
that right now, you know?
Yeah, and I think and yes, not interacting with AI, and also I think just from like a content standpoint that like for a long time, a lot of my work and it still is like blog posts and articles and sort of more kind of financial education pieces and stuff with SEO, but like folks that are working several jobs and struggling to pay their bills are not spending time reading blog posts, right? And so how
Yeah.
are we sort of reaching them in other ways and recognizing that like, I think now I'm focusing a lot more on like what is that kind of core messaging and then what are those channels that we're actually reaching people
Yes.
through because a lot of times it's not going to be the sort of medium to longer form content.
I think content can also be a conduit though to like product development, right? If
Yes.
your customer is not engaging with content online, then that changes your product and the delivery of your product as
Hmm.
well, because that means their behavior isn't there, right? So
Yeah.
I do think there's something very important to think about from there, because I think sometimes content, marketing, comms get sort of brushed to the side or it's not as
Very much an
core to everything
afterthought.
else.
Yeah.
But you learn so much about the customer that way.
It's interesting in a lot of what you're touching on. So one of the things that I feel like our founders struggle with, and I know I did when I was selling into this space, is w trying to define the messaging per ICP. We're
Mm,
selling to an end consumer at the end of the day. However, it's filtered by what the credit union, what the bank, what whoever
Right.
needs. So that brings us into the idea of like, yes, you're putting in your prompts, you're writing good prompts to have an LLM help you. But if we struggle so much just trying to figure out how do we talk about what we're doing, obviously it needs training in order to understand that nuance.
mhm.
Like, what does that look like practically if you're thinking about maybe how to get something automated or do something a little simpler, but take that complexity into mind?
Yeah. I think even before getting into the AI piece, like, yeah, this complexity is hard regardless, even as a human, when you understand that these are different things. And I think that I think this is a I think this is an issue for a lot of consumer facing fintechs that they are really excited about the like end impact
Yes.
for that consumer, and that's what's driving them. That's the mission, that's their motivation, but they have to be talking about sort of the outcomes, right, that
Hmm.
come earlier.
Yes.
um and so and how does that connect to the bank? Like, okay, we are going to make it easier for your customers to save more money and reward them for that. Great. What does that have to do with me as the
With
person that
me.
cares about deposits and revenue? Right. And
Hmm.
so, like, how are you connecting that with like loyalty? How are you connecting that with sort of profits? Or how are you connecting it with like operational efficiency? Because I think that's what a lot of these fintechs are talking about now, that like it's like finding that balance between kind of cost savings versus like, money making
Hmm.
things. And I feel like it's a whole separate topic, but I do think that like consumer bank loyalty is like a really interesting space right now where
Mhm.
people are essentially just like paying people $500 to move their savings account
Yes.
over. And so like
That's
there's just a lot.
driving them.
There's a lot to do with loyalty that's sort of beyond content. So,
Oh,
but it
yes.
like I can yeah, that's I'm not just
We can have another
put a pin
conversation
in
about
that.
that.
Interesting thing about you that I loved when we had our chat was, and it ties it all together, the work with SoFi, what we just talked about, how to message and how to kind of get everything together, is you're super passionate about financial inclusion.
Mm.
What does all of that look like? Fintech for good. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about that because oftentimes, when you're trying to sell into financial institutions, they're like, oh, yeah, that's just like a nice add-on,
Mm.
but it's
Yes.
not. So I'd love to
Yeah.
hear your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think like since I was like an econ major in college, that like I have like geeked out on how are we leveraging financial incentives to do good in the world. Like I really
Oh,
like if we take a lot of the like behavioral economics basics as truth, and we don't have to get into whether that's true or not, but like the idea of like people having their best interests and like wanting to earn more money, again, very capitalist point of view, but like even if that's true, I actually believe that we can leverage that to do more good, because like I don't think the impact has to come at the expense of growth, and that like profit and purpose can fuel each other. And I think that's, again, where especially now that I think direct to consumer is really hard for fintechs, and they're in some ways having to partner with banks, credit unions, financial institutions, like being able to talk about both of those things is essential. And thinking about how that sort of purpose and that impact for that end consumer is sort of coming back and having these impacts at kind of earlier stages for the banks, or how is it having kind of long-term revenue impacts, that we have to be able to talk about both and not talk about them as distinct things.
I love that.
I love that thought. Yeah.
Well, and I feel like that is something a lot of fintechs struggle with. Like, as you're talking about this, I think of it kind of like how I was a theater major, so I took the traditional route into fintech. And I think about my friends who were like, it's my art. I have to starve for my art. But I think a lot of people who think I'm having impact, we're driving a purpose, I can't worry too much about the money. I think they let that kind of same mentality where it's like, well, it would just be really selfish, or like undercut the mission if I really do drive this back to the ROI. So they almost like throw it. I don't know. This is just, again, I'm armchairing this. I don't know what you're seeing, but I do feel there's something to that where it's like, don't be ashamed of it. Make the money.
Well,
Show them the people who do it.
I have left fintech twice and come back to it. And I feel like it's connected to this idea. So like once I left it to work in like a comms agency for progressive causes. Another time it was actually to like try my hand at career coaching and like spreading the Arden gospel of not working too hard, and we can live our lives.
You're getting a mug with that on it, by the way. You said it, I was like, I can see it. This is happening.
Yeah. And so like in both cases of being in trying to pursue these other paths, being really committed to them, being excited about them, I found myself pulled back to finance. And the reason is that so many of the decisions we make, whether that's to quit a bad job, whether that's to pursue an artistic endeavor that we really care about, whether it's to end a relationship we need to leave, pursue education, get health care, all of this is tied to financial security.
Yes.
And without a safety net, it is really hard to create change for yourself, no matter how motivated you are. Even if I really cared about people shifting their relationship with work, or making sure that people got SNAP benefits, making sure people have access to reproductive health care, like just so much of that is connected to your ability to like say yes or no because you have money.
Yeah.
And so I realized that if I was going to have if I was going to have the greatest impact with the skills that I have, that it was best for me to focus that on helping financial inclusion startups communicate better. That was the best use of my time, where it had the broader impact as opposed to focusing on one issue area.
Yeah, like broader impact. And I would imagine that heavily drives the way you select your client. It's almost like being a little more selective about who your clients are, because you're looking at it from a higher up lens of driving a greater goal.
Yeah, I mean, I got tagged in like someone was looking for a crypto writer. But they looking for a fintech writer, and then later on it was like clear they were fintech, and multiple people tagged me in this, which is very kind, and like the network works. And I'm just like, I don't do crypto. That's not something I do. And like, not all of my clients are like doing sort of kind of direct, underserved, underbanked kind of products and services. Some of them are just sort of making the financial systems work better and like creating infrastructure that make it all work better for everyone, whether that's like, addressing fraud, making data a little bit cleaner so it's easier for everyone to use so that either the end consumer has a better experience and knows what the heck's going on when they look at their bank account, or the people that are working within these companies are able to spend their time on the actual like people focused human tasks that they want to be doing and not these sort of arduous processes. And so, but that to me still counts, right? Like that is still like making the financial system better for everyone. However, I also don't just want to work for those clients because I do believe that we've got to build products and solutions very specifically tied to the needs of specific groups of people that have been ignored if we are going to, push forward a system and broaden finance to work for more people. We can't just sort of keep just trying to make everything that exists better. We have to be thinking more creatively and like moving in other directions too.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like that is especially a big challenge in the US where so many of our financial products are layers and layers and layers of new tech on old tech or rebranded technology.
Yes.
That's all of a sudden P2P payments or, you know what I mean? Like it's a rebrand.
Yes.
It's a better use of that rail, or that payment. But it's just, there's things like that I think our system, the way it's built, inherently puts some of those roadblocks in. But there are small things sometimes I feel like you could do to make things more inclusive, like, one of the biggest complaints I hear is, do they offer it in Spanish?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the way that you speak to audiences that are from a different culture. It differs, especially like one of my really good friends, it runs and works with companies that like to tap into the Latino market. And one of the things that they struggle with is Latinos are not all the same. We're all different. Like I am Argentine, so the way I approach and speak is different than like my sister-in-law who's from Mexico. And so like bridging that gap. And I think like would love to hear this from you, but one of the things that I find is we are doing almost like a similar thing in that we have our own language that we communicate. All like Holly just said, rails. A person who is a layman person going to a bank, rails, they don't even know what that means. To us, we're like ACH. Like, what is it?
Our alphabet soup in this industry. Yeah.
So, well, and I think that's where we get into like these issues, like when we were joking earlier about like AI powered modern finance, like we get into this, like, it's like we get into jargon that's like words that people know, but that then don't mean anything anymore. Right. And so you've got to find this balance between like, again, like, how are we being really clear? How are we being really simple? And that like the thing that I think about when I'm writing is like, one audience, sort of one prototype of an audience that I think about is my mom. My mom's a kindergarten teacher, was a kindergarten teacher, very smart, incredible kindergarten teacher, very sought after in the public school system. But like that, she doesn't understand deep things about finances. And like, I filled out all of my own FAFSA forms and like, I have like, done some of her taxes stuff for her. And like, I've called the insurance companies and pretended to be her, right? Like, this is a very smart person, but this isn't her realm of expertise. And so we need to be able, like, explaining to things, like, we need to be able to explain things in a way that, like, smart people can understand. And, like, smart doesn't mean that you know what this is. Like, people ask me, like, what's fintech? And I'm like, it's everything and it's nothing. Like, it overlaps everything at this point. And, like, so it doesn't really mean anything anymore. Like,
right. But there's fintech adjacent. There's all the different things.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Which is interesting in and of itself. I feel like I end up telling people use your clients' words in the best way that they're giving it to you, which is every single time you hop on a call, they're telling you something. Use their language, talk to them in the way that they're want to be spoken to. But I think that kind of leads us into one of the things that I always think about is in this podcast, we like to have an actionable thing that someone could use tomorrow and it would change their life. So if like you wanted to think about one thing you would say to all the founders when they think about creating content, writing copy, even just like, how do you talk about your product what would you tell them, especially when they're first starting out?
Yeah, I think the thing that I've honestly just been really thinking a lot specifically this week is this idea of like focus on the outcomes that
Mhm.
I think a lot of times we get into explaining what the thing is, right? Like what is the process? What are we offering? And we're not actually explaining sort of what the outcomes are.
Mhm.
And I think, even if we're just talking about like hero language at the top of a website, like that's people can get confused before they even kind of scroll down the page about what it is that you do because
Yeah.
they
Yes.
don't understand why they need this data enrichment. They don't understand why they need AI powered coaching, but they understand that you're going to make it easier for them to get a small business loan, or you are going to make it easier to reward your consumers for the things you actually say that you're going to reward them for, right? Like that's what we need to focus on is like figure out what that outcome is. And it doesn't need to be like we make your life easier, like we make finance seamless, like be specific.
Yes.
Yeah.
About what those outcomes actually look like. And I think if that's just sort of like one change you make in your kind of like headline, early high
Hmm.
level messaging, then that makes a really big difference.
That's super helpful. Like so easy to implement. Like take
Hmm.
Yeah,
away
yeah. It's and like
everything.
literally, I had a had a prospecting call scheduled earlier today, and I like went on their website and I was like, I don't know what this means,
Hmm.
and
Was a game changer.
I went into AI and I was like, I need to make this more outcome oriented. Here's some more information about what this business does. Can you help me sort of make some like very quick high level recommendations? And it's like a few just very easy like shift this kind of words to this kind of word instead of saying this thing, say this thing, and like
Yeah.
it's I would work with that client then to figure out what really makes sense. What are their clients actually care about? I'm making a lot of assumptions based on this, but already I can be like, this is at least going to tell people what you do, like why they should even read past the top of this page.
Yeah, why should they even care?
Yeah.
Well, we've kind of covered a whole bunch of different
Yeah.
topics about
Yeah.
everything that impacts content creation, writing,
Hmm.
being real. Be great to kind of hear from you. What are some of the things that you're looking forward to in 2026? If
Yeah.
somebody wants to work with
Oh
you,
my gosh.
what are you looking for? Like,
How do they do that?
how do they do that?
Yeah. Great question. Gosh, I feel like it is already starting off to be like a real whirlwind of a year. I
Yes.
am always thinking about just in terms of my own sort of like financial stability and security. I very much believe in like multiple income streams. And
Hmm.
so,
Mm,
the primary way that I work with people and bring in income is through content messaging, kind of positioning, rebranding work with fintechs, with financial inclusion, not with crypto, not with buy now, pay later.
yeah.
Um, the list that is not the end of the list. Um, and but I'd say for me, I'm just like exploring a lot of different ways on again, like how can I have the biggest impact with the skills that I have while working
Hmm.
as little as possible.
I love
And
that.
so that's we're gonna see sort of what that is. I've got a lot of like experiments right now of things that I'm thinking about in terms of like finding sponsors for like custom content, in terms
Ooh.
of I lead Stripe's FinTech for Good community, and we're going to have several events around that through the rest of the year, mostly virtual, a few kind of in person around kind of conferences and events.
Awesome.
And yeah, there's going to be a lot of other just experiments and things that I'm like putting out there in the world. So if you want to go on the journey of what works and what doesn't, then LinkedIn is probably the best place to follow along.
Awesome.
And yeah, otherwise, my business is called Firefly Advising. I know there are a lot of fireflies right now, but I still really like them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my website's a fun time.
Yes, it
And
is.
so you can learn a little bit more about what I do there. But yeah, always happy to have what I would call vibe check calls. I can give you guys that link to put in the show notes if
That's
people want to
perfect.
schedule a chat with me just to see, talk through what their content and messaging challenges are and see if I can be helpful.
Awesome.
Super helpful and so needed. I read lots of very bad content.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's
We
only
do.
more and more of it now because it's so easy to create bad content now.
Yeah,
It really
it
is.
really is. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This was great. I feel like a lot of the people that listen to our show struggle with some of this stuff, and it'll be very useful for them.
Yeah. Thank you so
Amazing.
much,
Yeah.
Arden.
All
Yeah.
right.
Thanks for having me.